Hello everyone, it's Gabriel and welcome to yet another video about Firebase. And in this episode we are going to level up a little bit and present a way to create user groups using the Firebase rule system. By default, Firebase is not supporting user groups and we do need to create them manually. User groups are the best way to control permissions on your application. For instance, if you want to add moderators to your application, you will want to create moderator group and add the wanted users to it. A user that is in this group will have more abilities than the rest of the users. This video idea actually came from you guys. I do try my best to read your comments and get feedback, so if there's any question or anything you wish to say, don't hesitate and share your thoughts. Also, if you like these videos, please consider subscribing, it really helps a lot the channel. So buckle up and enjoy the ride, because we are starting right now. So welcome back, and let's start by presenting you the application we're going to work with. On the left side we have the add message interface. You put the username and the message and click send. On the right side you can see the message list. Clicking on this X button will delete the message. The message owner, the admin and the permitted users are the only one who are able to delete the messages. So the second page is the admin panel. It is there to add users to the permitted user list. So you copy the user ID from the Firebase console and you paste it on the admin panel. Adding this user will make him a permitted user and he will be able to delete messages later. So this entire project can be downloaded from GitHub and I will leave a link in the description below. Looking on the left we can see the project. We have three main HTML, the login, the index and the admin. And the most important part here is basically the JavaScript. You can already see some of the JavaScript pages are populated with code. Those lines are very well explained in previous videos I made, so I don't want to waste anyone's time. If you want, you can go ahead and check them out. If not, you can go ahead and continue the video. So open up Firebase and go to the database. Get started on the real-time database and select the Start in Lock mode. Go to the rules and delete the read and the write. Now this is the structure of the data. We will have user groups and we will have messages. The user group will have a list of group names and each group name will have a list of user IDs. The read and the write for this user group's property is gonna be done only by a user you want to be administrator user. So copy the user ID you want and paste it the same way I do. The next thing we are going to do is actually create the groups. So we have a group called permitted, which will hold a list of user IDs. So the user ID with the variable sign, and I'm gonna validate it to true because it really doesn't matter what data I'm putting inside as long as it exists in the permitted group. Now I'm going to do another group just for example. If you want, you can make as many as you want. Going back to the project, open the admin page, and this is the area that we're going to take care of now. Adding a user ID here will add it to the list below. Opening the admin HTML, I'm going to annotate the list that you saw in the admin page, and I'm going to add another script so I can use the API service. So going back to the admin JavaScript file, and I really like to start with an init function. This init function will run every time the page is loaded. I'm going to get all the user groups first of all from the server. To get the user groups, I'm gonna use the read method from the API service, and it's gonna receive a parameter of the path and two callback functions. The first one is the success, the other one is the failure. To receive the actual data we need to use the val method, and let's console log it just to see that everything is okay. So before we can actually run this code, we need to define the path, which is the user groups. After I define the path, I'm gonna open up the application. Pressing the F12 button and refresh will give us a null value. Null value is very good because it means the application ran, but it has no data. So now we're going to work on the add function. The add function is actually going to receive a user ID and add it to the list. So first of all, let's put on the API the add function and gonna create it. And it's gonna use the create method from the API service. The create gets a path, a body, and a callback function. If there is a parameter, it means it's an error. So we will console log it, otherwise it is a success. So let's define the user ID. Well, the user ID will be taken from the user ID input. And defining the path is going to be the user groups, the name of the group we want to add the user to, which is the permitted, and the user ID. About the body, it really doesn't matter what the body is going to be. I used just ID, but again, it really doesn't matter what the data is going to be, as long as the path holds the user ID. This is what counts. So I'm gonna add a test user ID, and you can see if I'm refreshing the page, it's gonna show me the permitted, and inside of it we have the user ID we just entered. Ignore the other permitted, is something that I've tested with earlier. Now the only thing left to do is to show the actual user IDs on the list of the page. So I'm going to iterate through the data and create the element that I just annotated earlier and insert the data into it. Now you can see I'm using a native JavaScript just for the simplicity of this tutorial, but basically you can use whatever language you want. You can use even JavaScript interfaces such as Angular and React, and it would work perfectly. So going back to the page and refreshing it, actually I can see now the user ID I've just added. Adding another one and refreshing the page will show me the other one. But is there a way that all the data will show up without me needing to refresh? Well, the answer is yes, there is, and it's a pretty cool feature Firebase gives us. So I'm gonna create a new method called Authorized, and it's gonna be very similar to the read function, with one exception. It's not gonna be once, but it's gonna be on. So let's replace the once to on, and after the value we will give a second parameter, which is the success callback function. And that's basically it. Now let's go back to the admin.js and replace the method to the auto-read, and the rest will stay the same. So let's go back to the page and refresh it, and you can see on the right side an error. To fix this kind of errors, sometimes you need to hold the refresh and select the third option, and it will clean the cache memory, so it will reload the JavaScript again. So by adding a new user ID, I don't need to refresh anymore, because when the data is getting changed, this function is getting notified. So until now, all we've done is creating a list of permitted users. Now, we need to take care of the message property in Firebase. So I'm gonna go back to the Firebase rules, and now we are going to take care of the messages. Now the messages is gonna have a read, and only authenticated users are going to be able to read the messages. And then I'm gonna put a variable called message ID. This is something that I'm gonna generate. I'm gonna generate a random ID, and this ID will be the property name. It will hold three properties: message, username, and the user ID. But to get the user groups feature to work, I really need to focus on the right function. Pay attention carefully, and you will see that I am dividing each line on the right function to be a different expression. So the first one tells me that only authenticated users are able to write data. So data is the data already exists in the database, while new data is the data that is being sent to the database. So by checking if the current data has a property called UID, I can verify if the current user that is requesting the data or trying to update the data is the same one as the user that created the data before. And again, if it is the same user, then he can delete his own message or update it. So the first line means the user must be authenticated. The second line means that the user must be himself. Now the third line that we are about to write gives write permission to the administrator to this specific user ID. So if a message is being sent from this user ID, it is the administrator and he should have access. In the last condition, we want to allow permitted users to also write data. So the root word will bring us back to the rule directory. So if we're going to type root.child, I'm gonna have access to all the rules childs. So the first child is user groups, the second child is the permitted user, and I'm gonna check if the user ID that is sending the data actually exists in the permitted users list. So if he is in this list, he will have a write permission to manipulate the data on the database. And it's always a good practice to put yourself some annotations, so if you will come back to this code, you will understand what you have done. So I really suggest you to go back a little bit on the video and pause it on the final result of the rule. This is the most important part in this video. The actual implementation of the message inside the rule is what allowing the permitted user to work. What I'm doing now, I'm connecting the HTML with the JavaScript. I'm just fast forwarding it so you won't be wasting your time. But there is a part that I wanted to show you, and this is how I generate a message ID. This is a function that actually you select a template and it will replace all the X's with random numbers. I think it's a very useful function, and I have a video explaining how it works. But anyways, I wanted you to see this. And again, I'm gonna use the API service to create a message. And again, you need to pass a path and a body and a callback function. So those things already should be familiar, so I'm not going to show it over again. So we have actually made it, we created a message. Now we need to spawn the message containers on the right panel. And again, I'm gonna fast forward it. And again, if you just want to see all the project by yourself and follow along with what I'm doing, you can go ahead and download it. I left a link in the description. And again, if you are familiar with some frameworks such as Angular or React or Ember, Backbone, whatever you want, it might be much faster than what I'm doing right now, because I'm just recreating in JavaScript the elements, while in those frameworks you can already create this template string and just compile it into HTML elements. And you can see when I'm clicking on the send button, it will actually update and show another message. Now I'm going to populate the delete function, which is one of the most important parts of this video, because deleting a message that is not yours is only possible if you're an administrator or a permitted user. So now you can see I delete a message with the administrator. This message actually was the administrator's message, but it can delete any message, I assure you. Now I'm gonna log in with a not permitted user, and I'm gonna try to delete a message, and you see that it gives me a permission error. So going back with the administrator, and I'm going to put this user as a permitted user. So let's copy his user ID. And I'm gonna add this user to the permitted users. Now this user is a permitted user, and I will log in with him. And I should be able to delete now messages. And again, because he is in the permitted users list. We saw some bunch of new stuff like the auto-read function and how to create user groups and permissions. And I really encourage you to write this code yourself. Even if you just download the project and write only the rules in Firebase, it is still very good practice. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. And as always, I'm gonna see you in the next one.